Hey guys, this is GamerGuy. Welcome to another Pokemon trading card game history video. We're on to a lot of people's favorite set around this 2017 era. Guardians Rising is insanely good and has definitely made the format a lot better overall for us here. We're going to be spending a couple of sessions on this one in terms of battles because there's a ton of decks to show off and there's a lot of fun to be had here. So yeah, get ready for that. I suppose it's a quite a large set. There's like 180 something cards in here if you include all of the bonus stuff down here. But even as far as just looking at some of the trainer stuff here, there's a lot of really strong bits in this section. And yet several different decks come out of this one. Most of the GXs are really strong in here. And we're in that sort of point where we start getting quite a lot of GXs per set, so there is that too. We also have a couple of promos, one of which is an early release of a card that will be like full art release in the next set, but is actually very, very strong in this set as well. So lots of very good stuff to look after here, and we will go through it all now. So yeah, we've done one testing session of this already. It's been super enjoyable, and we haven't even cleared every deck that we want to play yet within that, so there's a lot to look forward to in here. As far as the promos go, because it's probably the best first bit to look at, we have like two very good ones, one kind of okay one, and one not so good. But if you go back and see anything from, the Wasi, he loves Beware. So we'll go over that one first. It's a 210 HP GX. It's got a free energy retreat, which is heavy ball searchable at least. So there is that. Although you're not going to see very much heavy ball from one of the main cards in the set we'll get into, just because it's an item basically. And it's got two okay attacks and one really bad one here. Bear Hug is sort of reasonable. For 3 colorless energy, you do 80 damage and prevent the opponent from retreating next turn. For 4 colorless energy, double impact does 100 per heads you flip out of only 2 coins, so it's not really that great. Although there is a Victini in this set that will let you reflip, so you could increase your odds a little bit there. It's still less than 50% to hit 200 with this though, and even then 200 doesn't KO everything, so is there a point? Probably not. Its GX attack is the other thing you might look at here though. For the same 4 colorless energy cost, you discard the opponent's active Pokemon and all cards attached to it. You don't take prizes for that because a discard is not a KO, but if the opponent's got a really well established Pokemon in their active and it doesn't have damage counters and stuff on it, like it's a big stage 2 or something, you can probably make this work and do some pretty good stuff with that. So like, it's okay. There's a might as well look at it in the moment because it's here. There's a non-GX Beware in this set that isn't really very good in the attacking form, but if you evolve into it, you can draw 3 cards. So, like, I guess you could play this with Evolution Spray maybe or something like that. But, there is a non-GX in line that is at least passable. But, yeah, card itself, not super impressive in the end. Tapu Bulu over here is incredibly good. This is 180 HP GX here. I mean, you'd expect this to be in the main set because it's Guardians Rising, the Island Guardians, but Bulu and Feeny actually is missing from this as well. That doesn't get released until next set. The key thing with the GXs for the Tapus is they do not have any weakness or resistance stats on them. So even though this is a grass type, it does not get killed by fire automatically, which makes the Volcanion matchup actually somewhat doable. Its 2 attacks are somewhat reminiscent of Landorus EX in a way. Horn Attack is just a straight 30 damage, so it doesn't have the 30 snipe that Landorus EX had, but Nature's Judgment is very similar to Land's Judgment from before, except the damage numbers are up a bit. 2 grass and a colorless, it does 120 base, and if you discard all the energy from this thing, it does 180 instead, which is of course enough to KO itself. There's a damage mod in this set that gets it up to 210, which makes it very powerful as well, and it is heavy ball searchable as well. That actually does matter for the deck that you tend to play it in, because it's played with a Vikavolt from the previous set that accelerates grass and lightning energy from the deck. 2 of the stages of that Pokemon are also heavy ball searchable, so you'll very often see it as a one-off tech in there as well. Tapu Wilderness is the GX attack over here. For the same cost as Nature's Judgment, you only do 150 damage, but you don't have to discard any energy, so I guess that can sometimes be good. Again, Choice Band gets it to 180, so it can do well in the mirror, and against a lot of the other GXs that we have at the moment as well. And the plus side to doing this is that you heal all the damage from this guy as well. So if it doesn't get one shot, and maybe you could finagle it with like Fighting Fury Belt or something. If it doesn't get one shot, then you can fully heal it, still do a really good amount of damage. You can probably KO something with Lysander to make this work out as well. Super nice card, and it's incredibly aggressive actually. The deck is really powerful and does do quite well over its tenure in Standard. Tapu Koko is something you are going to be seeing an awful lot for a very long time here. This card is ridiculous. Its second attack is nothing special, just 100 damage for 2 light and the colors, but everything else about this card is basically perfect. 110 HP, maybe a little bit low for a legendary Pokemon, but it doesn't have a retreat cost, and as a basic Pokemon that's insane. And Flying Flip, to this day, is probably one of the strongest spread attacks that we've seen. For a double colorless energy on a basic Pokemon, you do 20 damage to each of the opponent's Pokemon, which is insanely strong. Like, you consider most of the attacks that we've had in the past, it's been like, you know, maybe the luckiest you get is like 1 energy to spread 10 or something. That's usually on an evolution Pokemon as well. This is just incredibly powerful, and it will only get better as we get through this format too. Spread does get quite a few tools as we go along. There's a payoff for Spread in this set as well, and of course we can pair it with stuff like Decidueye from before that will enable you to do a bunch more stuff with it. And yeah, there's just a lot of firepower that comes out of this one card, and it's for a double colorless, which we have in format obviously, as you can see with the nice golden double colorless that we have up here. Lurantis is basically one of the things that Lurantis GX was missing before. I tried to make it work in the previous set and it didn't, just do nothing unfortunately. And it's all because of the ability here. Its attack is nothing special, but the attacks of your grass and fire Pokemon do 20 more damage to the opponent's active. The fire part doesn't tend to matter because you don't tend to be able to mix this with anything that way, but this means that your Lurantis GX can start doing 60 or maybe 80 damage with its first attack whilst accelerating energy. That makes it much more reasonable in this sort of format, and it means that things like Tapu Bulu can hit for really high numbers without necessarily having to discard all its energy as well. So I know Sai is looking forward to playing the Lurantis Bulu deck. We'll see if that works out better than Vikavolt, but yeah. As far as the other stuff goes in here, probably talk about the trainers first, as always, because they are mostly pretty impactful, but a couple of the stadium cards are not quite as good here. Aether Paradise Conservation Area, there's a big problem with stadiums like this in here, that they don't do anything immediately, and that is not going to help because we have Field Blower in this set, basically. But basic grass and lightning Pokemon take 30 less damage from the opponent's attacks is a really strong effect, especially with the Tapus in here, because we do have Tapu Koko GX as well, so that can gain a benefit from this. It's really strong. The problem, of course, like I just said, is that it is passive. If the opponent bounces the stadium, or more likely Field Blowers the stadium, then it goes away and nothing good happens with it. Yeah, Field Blower itself is worth talking about now just because it is kind of crazy for this set. It is Windstorm from Generation 3. Choose 2 in any combination of Pokemon tools and stadium cards in play and discard them. So not just Tool Scrapper, we did need Tool Scrapper back in format, but this one can also get rid of the stadium, which, yeah, effectively makes these sort of passive things like that and Altar of the Sun pretty much useless. Fire and Metal Pokemon have no weakness is a really cool thing to have if it wasn't for the fact that it's so easy to bounce, because it's not just your own counter stadium now that can get rid of it. It is Field Blower too, and that just makes it very difficult to justify. 2 stadiums that aren't difficult to justify though. Altar of the Moon is really powerful, makes your Pokemon have Psychic or Dark Energy attached to them, pay 2 less to retreat, so that often gives you 0 retreat on these things without having to commit the tool slot to Floatstone, so that's really good. And the other one is Brooklet Hill. which is effectively a modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Field spell in a way. Once during each player's turn, that player may search for a basic water or fighting Pokemon, put it onto their bench, and shuffle their deck afterwards. So, if you don't have a full bench, this can give you a free deck search as well, which is pretty useful. But it also just means every turn, you can just get another basic Pokemon. And there's a lot of good water and fighting Pokemon you could want. This actually replaces any sort of stadium that you would play in Volcanion, just because it can search for Volcanion EX and the one Staryu that deck plays as well. So, just to give you some examples, even a fire deck can take advantage of this. It's kind of crazy. As far as the other stuff goes, Aqua Patch is literally just Dark Patch for water Pokemon here. Attach your water energy from your discard pile to one of your bench water Pokemon. Very, very strong card, of course. Is an item, which is going to be a bit of a problem in terms of the attacker department here, but the decks that play this can kind of get around that, and any acceleration like this is exceptionally strong, and basically always sees play. I think the exception is Dark Patch in Modern, actually, and that technically has seen play, it just isn't in one of the top tier decks at the moment. So yeah, it's still very, very powerful. Choice Band does get the very fun championship like promo thing print as well. I personally don't care for this one. It's a good artwork, it's just not... I have a thing against cards that are like not actually representing the art, the thing properly. So like, this is a Choice Band, right? This is a Primeape wearing a Choice Band. This is not a Choice Band card to me. Anyway, enough about the actual artwork. What does the card do? It gives your Pokemon 30 more damage against GXs or EX Pokemon. It is backported, which is good, so it means that, you know, it's much more versatile in this transition period. It gives any Pokemon this, so it's kind of the same sort of thing as Muscle Band that way, but it doesn't affect single prizes, which is kind of an important distinction, because Muscle Band was plus 20 to everything and just made like EX Pokemon able to one-shot non-EX Pokemon way too easily, way too consistently too. Like Manectric was doing 140 damage every time, right? For 2 energy. That was just really silly. But here, it is specifically against the multi-prize Pokemon that you do more damage here. This is of course still incredibly powerful and still worth playing at minimum 2, but usually 3 or 4 in almost every single deck. There are very few exceptions, but it's good because it doesn't overly punish the single prizes that are already having a bit of a hard time that way. So yeah, also gives them some benefits as well, which is quite nice. But it can be used on everything, so it's never a dead slot. Energy Lotto is like Pokegear for energy cards, which is interesting. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck. If you find an energy there, any energy, not just basic, you can put it into the hand and you shuffle everything else back. This is used to find double colorless energy and stuff like that. It effectively replaces the Misty's Determination slot, which is pretty strong, to be honest. It's, you know, obviously being able to get basic energy and stuff is really good too. But yeah, there are a few decks that will just be like, I need to find, you know, like a double colorless or a rainbow energy or something like that. And this is a really good way of doing it. So yeah. Energy Recycler gets an awesome artwork print here as well. I really like this one, so I'll be using that quite a bit. It's important to keep in format, I suppose. Vikavolt Tapu Bulu then does play like 2 of this card, so very nice to have that. Hans Timer gets a print here too, and an alternate artwork way later on in the format stuff. You could probably remove the Lead promo stamp or something, this would be really nice, but you know. There's a fair few of these that we'll see as we go through. Like Field Blower itself has one too. These are a couple of these tools you will be seeing in the far future with this generation, so nice stuff there. As far as the supporters go, we have Hala, which shuffles your hand into your deck and draws 4 cards, but if you've used a GX attack during the game, it shuffle draws 7. There are a few GXs in this set which prioritize using their GX attack as early as possible, and you know, there was still Solgaleo from the previous set that you would also do that sort of thing with. So if you are playing a deck that will prioritize its GX attack early, this can be very powerful, because the Shuffle Draw 7 is very, very strong. But Shuffle Draw 4, obviously not quite so much. However, it is very good to play as a one-of because of Tapu Lele that we'll see later on. So, super strong card to have around anyway. Mallow is pretty interesting. This is a return to Oracle from all the way back in like Aquapolis, and we did play that quite a lot too back then, so interesting card to have. You basically get any 2 cards from your deck and put them on top of your deck in any order. So if you have a draw ability in play as well, for example Octillery, then this just lets you fetch out whatever cards you want. Shaman is still playable even if it has been massively scaled back at this point, so you could use Shaman to draw the cards here as well. And yeah, basically a double computer search can be really strong so long as you've got some synergy with it as well. Max Potion gets a reprint here. That's nice to keep in format for Gen 7. This means it'll be in format for a very long time actually, because yeah, Sun and Moon On is 2019 format, I believe, so because next one is like Breakthrough. So yeah, this stays in format for a very long time, which is good. Multi-switch is interesting. I actually thought this came out in a previous set, and I was trying to play around it in a matchup that it just didn't exist in. You move any energy from one of your bench to your active Pokemon. So this includes special energy, which energy switch is not allowed to move, and that's really the main draw for it. Because it is a bit more restricted, energy switch can move from active to bench as well, which sometimes does matter. So you're not, and you know, obviously energy switch can also move from bench to other bench, so it's more versatile. But this lets you power up your main attacker with, say, a double colorless energy that you have stored on something else on the bench. So good stuff there. Finally, we have Rescue Stretcher, which is a reprint of one of the old rocket thingies. I forget exactly what it was called. It was oh god, it's basically a Pokemon recycler sort of thing, but I forget the name of it, unfortunately. You either get to put a Pokemon from your discard pile into your hand, or you shuffle 3 Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck. So it can basically be the Pokemon side of Super Rod, or it can be Buddy Buddy Rescue without giving the opponent advantage as well. Incredibly strong card. We do see this played quite a lot. Some decks will play a ton of it, like Persimmon plays 4 of this card, because you just need to get your Persimmons back. So yeah, expect to see quite a lot of it. Finally, there's not a lot of supporters in this set, so we do just get full arts of the 2 that we have, and Howl gets one as well. I mean, the Alolan Raichu is cute, so we'll allow it, I guess. On to the main set proper, and the first thing I have to talk about is the Garbodor over here, because this is the format warping card. Probably the strongest attacker that we have seen in a very, very long time. The catch is that even though it is very strong, it is possible to play around because its damage is dependent on the opponent. 120 HP, heavy ball searchable, so it's still very similar in that sort of way to the Garbodor that we had before. You can of course mix the lines, so you can play Ability Lock as well, and for 1 Psychic Energy, this thing does 20 damage for each item card in the opponent's discard pile. Yeah, this single-handedly changes how a lot of decks are played. There are still a lot of decks that will play a ton of items, but basically every single deck in the previous format was about 1/3 items, or maybe slightly higher than that. 20 item cards is not uncommon. Now, you have to be so much more careful about how you play said item cards. And a lot of decks I've seen will cut down on essentials like VS Seeker, sometimes Ultra Ball even, and also cut down on stuff like any excess things. Trainer's Mail basically goes away, Acrobite definitely goes away, and these cards have been dominating the format for a very long time. To see them just instantly evaporate because of this thing, kind of insane. I don't know if there has really been any other single attacker that has done this much to fundamentally change how decks were built. Like, the EXs, I guess, in Gen 5 were obviously pretty big too, but they more or less was like skewing the way that Pokemon cards and stuff were played, not how items were used. So, I don't know. It does have an alternate art later, but I just don't like the background on this one, so whatever. I'm sticking with this because it's the one I had to play with, alright? It is what it is. Alright, on to the set as a whole. If you are playing Expanded, this is the time where Forest of Giant Plants starts to get to be a massive problem, because we have a Grass-type Phantom now, and that means we can forest the giant plants into Trevenant immediately in Expanded. Luckily we're not playing that, but 2017 was the time when they were sticking with Expanded as a playable format, so that is something to note. The actual Trevenant itself is not the worst thing ever. You could probably pair it with Vileplume and it'd still be like okay. For a double colorless energy, 120 HP guy does 30 damage for each trainer card in the opponent's hand, so if you're stopping them playing the item cards, you could probably do quite a bit with this, but it's not consistent nor powerful enough to really make it work. So yeah, not a huge fan personally. Golisopod, this is a non-GX tech that you could play in the next set when we get Golisopod GX and the better Wimpod to play. 130 HP, but it takes 30 less damage from each attack that it has against it. That's pretty strong for a single prizer, let's be honest. And despite being underwater, it being a grass type in this form, it is weak to fire, so go figure. Resolute Claws is kind of interesting though. For one grass and double colorless it does 80, but if the opponent is a GX or an EX it does 150 instead. With that choice band that ends up being 180, and that's actually really powerful. One of the things the Golisopod GX deck kind of lacks is like that sort of output, because the Golisopod GX will get to it next set, but it caps out at about 120 for its normal attack. This kind of changes the math on that a fair bit, so it's pretty good. As I said, we have the Victini with Victory Star back here, so we can reflip coins for an attack if we want. We have to reflip all of them, obviously. This one has 70 HP instead of the 60 that it was before, which is actually somewhat relevant. I actually thought when one of the games we were playing, I think it was like Legendary Treasures or something, I ended up thinking the Victini from Gen 5 had 70 HP because of this one. So yeah, it's pretty neat. I guess the attack could also be somewhat reasonable into Fire Week GXs with a choice band. It would do like 160 at that point, but you're not really going to see it for that. There is a Chandelier that's got shady moves, so you can move a damage counter from one Pokemon to another. Not really good enough for a stage 2 at this point, but hey, it's there anyway, I suppose. There's an Oricorio that can search your deck for up to 3 basic fire Pokemon and bench them. Problem is, Bridget exists, so you probably don't need this too much, but I suppose you could search like an EX with it or something. I don't think there's any good enough ones for that at this point now. Salazzle's kind of cute. I don't think we've got any synergies with this yet until, like, I think next set Alola Muck GX comes out that could work with it, but when you evolve into it you can burn and poison the opponent's active. It's not disabling them with confusion or something like that like previous ones have been, but double status is pretty reasonable, and the burn status does immediately do 20 damage at this point, so you can effectively think of this as evolve into Salazzle, do 30 bonus damage to the opponent that turn. That's pretty strong, so not too bad there. Turtonator GX is kind of insane. This is a 190 HP basic GX, so it just falls out of range of a lot of attacks because they tend to do 180 here. Shell Trap is cute and actually has seen play just for that as well. For a double colorless energy it does 20, and during the opponent's turn, if this gets damaged by an attack, it puts 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. That is a lot of damage, and is definitely capable of some big disruption here. Probably not the main focus that you want on this, but it's neat that it has the option nonetheless. Bright Flame for 2 fire and a colorless does 160 damage and discards 2 fire from this Pokemon, so if you put a choice band on this, that is the 190 mark, which is really powerful, so worth it on that front. And then Nitro Tank GX gives Volcanion decks a very strong GX attack that they can use as well. For 1 fire energy, you attach 5 fire energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way that you like. This is also Heavy Ball searchable as well if you do decide to play that. Volcanion decks could play Heavy Ball, but they'll probably just play Brooklet Hill at this point because Volcanion can be searched with that as well, like the EX at least. And the regular one can't be searched for Heavy Ball, so they probably don't even bother with that. You could play Bridget to search for this though if you really wanted, so that's kind of neat. And yeah, Nitro Tank is just ridiculous. You can get so much extra acceleration and firepower out of that deck anyway that it's just ridiculously strong to have around. So yeah, good stuff. There's a Sand Slash that lets you draw a card once per turn. It's not nearly good enough obviously because we've had this effect before and it's never seen play, but it's kind of worth noting anyway just because it's draw support. Vulpix! Alolan Vulpix, both of these are exceptionally cute. I think everybody else is going to play this one from what I've seen so far, so I'm just going to stick with the original. It is a 60 HP basic that sees play with or without Ninetales in your deck, because Beacon is nuts. For 0 energy, search your deck for up to 2 Pokemon, reveal them, put them into the hand. The rest of the card doesn't matter. I mean, 20 damage for a DCE, sure, it's, I guess, kind of neat. It does have a 1 retreat, so it's not too difficult to get out the active too. And yeah, I mean, most decks, most basic Pokemon have like a 1 retreat cost, so on your first turn, if you go second, you can pay 1 energy to retreat to this, and it doesn't need energy to attack, so you just get your extra Pokemon. This is unbelievably good for evolution decks, because it lets you get your evolution Pokemon for the next turn. You can go, get Bridget first turn, get all your basics down, including a Vulpix, retreat to the Vulpix, get Beacon, get your evolutions up, and if the opponent doesn't immediately end you, your next turn is looking incredibly powerful. So yeah, super good card here, and we will be seeing a lot of it, even if you don't play the Ninetales. But if you do play the Ninetales, it's pretty good too. Alolan Ninetales GX is 210 HP, so on the relatively bulky side as far as stage 1s go. And it's got 3 very strong attacks here, and only a 1 retreat cost too. Very nice. Ice Blade for a double colorless energy does 50 to one of the opponent's Pokemon. That's solid enough. Blizzard Edge for 2 water and a colorless discards 2 energy from this ink, but does 160 damage, so 190 with a choice band. Once again, gets these bigger basic GXs as well, which is good. And Ice Path for a double colorless energy shifts all the damage from this Pokemon to the opponent's active. Obviously it's your GX attack, so you only get to do that once, but it's max potion without the discard, and it does insane damage to the opponent. If you don't one-shot this thing, or set it up very carefully for a 2-shot, you are in a huge amount of trouble against this, and there's a lot of decks that will struggle against it too. It is also, being an ice type, it is weak to metal, which there is a good metal deck in this set, but it's not the most common weakness to have, so it very often doesn't interact with too many type chart stuff that way. So yeah, most waters are weak to grass at the moment, so they have a bad Decidueye matchup. This thing flips the script and actually is like pretty reasonable into Decidueye, because it isn't weak to it, and it can just shift its damage away if it gets too badly hit. Decidueye has a hard time killing things in one shot, so yeah. Other than that, there's not a ton to speak about in most of the waters until we get closer to the end here. There's a Wailord, it's still got 200 HP, that's pretty much it. Wailord always has a lot, so it's there. There's inexplicably Vanillux that has the same attack as that Tapu Koko promo for 1 energy on a stage 2 though. Like, why do we have this? It's really weird. Its second attack is also really bad, so there's just like no reason to play it, but it's just funny. Like in the same set, basically, it gets Power Crap, which is silly. There's a Wishy-Washy combo here that's kind of neat. The 30 HP non-GX can switch itself with a GX that's in your hand, and that's about it really. It's got 0 retreat as a basic one, I guess. It's kind of cute. The GX one itself, it is weak to lightning instead of water, so it's a different weakness for the water type stuff to, oh sorry, instead of grass, not light, yeah, weak to lightning, not grass, like most waters are. But its attacks are also just not amazing. 210 HP is like somewhat big for a basic GX, like it is the biggest we have at the moment. But it's no Wailord GX, right? And that's what it's kind of aping, because it still takes 5 energy for its other attacks. That's just really bad, so there's not really any redeeming quality to this one, unfortunately. It does look cool at the very least, though, so it has that going for it. So, yeah. There's Alolan Golem makes its first thing in here. It's also not very good, but I guess with Victini you could probably do quite a bit of damage with the Electromagnetic Rock Wrecker, as the attack is here. Very funny attack name anyway, but yeah, you gotta have a lot of lightning energy on it. It's a stage 2, blah 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 blah. Doesn't really matter. There is a Vikavolt in here, which is pretty good. It's 240 HP. It does evolve, of course, from the same line as the Vikavolt that we had for Strong Charge, which is the big help for this thing. It will get it going pretty easily, and it only has a 1 retreat, which is surprisingly nimble. I think Vikavolt was probably like a mistake in terms of like stat distribution. I feel like I know it's probably deliberate that it has like 40 something base speed, but it's like its Pokédex entries and everything always say how ridiculously fast it is, and I don't understand why it's got like no speed to it. Anyway, that tends to be all the other ones have got super high retreats, and this one doesn't. I don't know why. It's weird. But yeah, Charge Beam, kind of interesting. 50 for 1 lightning, attaching energy from the discard to this Pokemon. If you are red candying into this very early, that could probably be pretty strong. And then Super Zap Cannon. It doesn't paralyze anything, but for a lightning and triple colorless, it does 180 damage and discards 2 energy from this Pokemon. Since you can strong charge to this, you can technically power this up every turn, basically, without too much issue. Gigatron EX also takes that same lightning and triple colorless energy cost and does 60 to each of the opponent's benched Pokemon. Doesn't hit the active, which is really annoying, but that 60 spread can be pretty devastating if you can set up fast enough. I think it would take a lot of effort to do though, because we're probably looking at turn attach, and then, you know, like on turn 1, and then turn 2 you need this, plus a Vikavolt, plus a turn attach to get to Gigatron and take out the opponent's bench, which is not particularly easy. It would be very funny if Shaman was still highly played at this point, because you could go Wide Lens to make it hit for weakness and kill every Shaman they have on the bench. That'd be very cool, but it just doesn't happen anymore. So yeah, it's neat, but it's usually in excess. Even the next card, which is really good in the deck, is generally in excess, but I played it as attack in my own version of Vikabulu here. Tapu Koko GX is very solid if you can get it going here. 170 HP, as long as you don't start with it, you're good, basically. 170 HP on the frail side for GXs. I think this is the lowest we've seen so far, but that's fine enough. It's got a good effect to go with it, so it's worth it. 2 retreat, unlike the 3 retreat, the 0 retreat, I should say, from the regular Tapu Koko. That's okay. It's still strong. And it's got 3 pretty solid traits to it. 2 lightning and the colors for 130 is like average enough, and that's fine. With a choice band it gets to 160, which is not quite enough to KO much of anything, but 130 is good 2-shot numbers, and it KOs most non-GXs, so that's fine. But it's got a couple other really solid traits to it here. For its ability, when you bench it from your hand, you can move any number of lightning energy from your other Pokemon to this Pokemon, and then switch it into the active. So it plays very similarly to what Dragonite EX did in the past, which was a very strong card at its time. But Tapu Thunder is a really good GX attack to have around, and is the main reason I play it with the Vikavolt stuff. Because, honestly, Tapu Wilderness I could sort of take or leave, but Tapu Thunder is insane. For 2 lightning and the colors, the same cost as its regular attack, it does 50 damage for each energy on the opponent's board. And it isn't energy cards, as I don't think that's really a distinction anymore. It is just energy in general. So if the opponent's got a couple of double colors down, suddenly that's 200 damage that you do out of nowhere. This card generally is going to get a one-shot with that attack, and it can be shadow dropped out of nowhere because you just shift the energy to it from the rest of your board. It's very, very powerful, and yeah, closes out games. The main thing I've done with it so far, like opponents on 2 prizes, I get the Tapu Thunder down, I end them to 2, I hit them for like 250 damage, get the KO that I need, and then next turn, if they can't immediately take me out, then I can just go ahead and win the game from there. So yeah, really, really strong. Most of the psychic stuff up until until this row, not too impressive. Like the Gothitelle really doesn't do very much anyway. But there's a couple of neat Oricorio forms over here. The psychic one here, the actual psychic one here. If you bench it, you can search your deck for up to 2 basic energy, put them into hand. It is pretty much the same thing as Professor's Letter, but it's level ball searchable. There's a couple of decks that you could consider playing this in. Professor's Letter being an item now obviously makes it a little bit less appealing in some things. So yeah, you might see it as a one-off in places. Probably not too often, but it's always possible. And the Sensu one, I wish this came out before, because This would have been exceptionally good against Night March, but it's like several sets too late. In Expanded, go nuts though. Lovable, Searchable, and Supernatural Dance for 1 colorless energy for each Pokemon in the opponent's discard pile. Put a damage counter on their board in any way that you like. This is still played sometimes, to be honest, because it is still good against Vespiquen, so if you have a really bad matchup against that deck, it's still fine. And yeah, it's alright, to be honest. Not much else to say with it. Night March puts all of their Pokemon in the discard and has a very low HP total on everything, so you get multiple prizes with the one Oricorio. So yeah, clearly in Expanded, this card is insane, but yeah, unfortunate that it didn't come out until after Night March rotated, you know. There's a Toxapex GX over here, I might as well speak about it too. It's not very good though, unfortunately. I suppose Spike Cannon could be funny with Victini, but really, that's a lot of bench space for that. And Super Intense Poison puts 10 damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon instead of 1 between turns. Problem is, it takes 3 Psychic Energy, which is also the GX attack as well, actually. 150 and immunity to, basically a free agility next turn, immunity to all effects of attacks, including damage. That's really nice, but if the opponent just gusts you or escape ropes or something, then that goes away anyway. And there's your GX attack. You know, the real downside here is just a triple Psychic cost. It's untenable. Not much else to say about it. Mimikyu, I think, is pretty fun. It has the Sableye attack of Filch, just draws 2 cards for 1 colorless. That's okay. 70 HP colorless, not even colorless, it's no weakness, no retreat cost. That sort of thing is kind of neat, I suppose. But 70 HP makes it kind of not matter that it doesn't have a weakness. But still, Copycat is solid. If the opponent's attack last turn was not a GX attack, you pay 1 Psychic and 1 colorless to use their attack as your own. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky maybe to get the 2 energy on it exactly, but this is the sort of thing where it's just like the opponent does a really powerful hit, or their sort of strongest standard attack or something, and you can kind of just come in and copy that for yourself. Like, if the opponent's Garb hits you last turn or something, now you've got an option on a basic Pokemon that you can just hit with. That's kind of neat. And there's a couple of Pokemon later on in the set, because we're still nowhere near done talking about the good Pokemon in the set. There's a couple later on that are worth noting as well for powerful attacks this could copy, so yeah. Dhelmise is interesting for the Metagross deck we'll speak on later on. It lets your metal Pokemon do 10 more damage to the opponent's active. Its actual attack is not particularly good, but is technically usable in the Metagross deck if you play some Psychic Energy. For 1 Psychic in the double colors, it does 70, and the opponent can't retreat during their next turn. Don't know why it's got a 2 retreat instead of like a 3 or something here. It really should have that kind of heavy retreat for how slow it is, but whatever. And then we get to probably the second, well, is it the second or is it the best card out of the set? It's hard to judge because it's not the best attacker, but it's certainly the best support Pokemon we'll see for quite a while. Tapu Lele GX is 170 HP, again, no weakness and resistance, it's a 1 retreat cost too, so plays very well with the Vulpix and stuff as well. And everything is good about this thing, really. Wonder Tag, as the ability, lets you search your deck for a supporter when you bench it, so this basically just replaces Shaman, more or less. Yeah, it doesn't let you draw a bunch of cards, and it's not once per turn, but it might as well be once per turn for most decks, because you can only play 1 supporter per turn. But that doesn't really matter. The point is you get whatever supporter you want out of your deck, which includes tech supporters, but also includes like consistency stuff that you just don't want to play a ton of, such as Bridget, because Bridget is exceptionally good in Gen 7, and this is one of the big reasons why. Energy Drive is also really good. You'll recognize this as Aero Ball, or more accurately, Mewtwo EX's X-Ball. 20 damage per energy between you and the opponent's active Pokemon. Base cost is double colorless, so you'll do 40 as a standard. However, this one cannot hit for weakness or resistance. It has finally been learned, right? X-Ball was definitely the mistake. They were seeing how far they can push stuff, and since then, like, this attack has not been able to hit for weakness, and also, or like, it doesn't hit itself for weakness at the very least, and yeah, this one also doesn't hit for resistance either, so you can hit through like Dark and Psychic, metal stuff that's resistant to Psychic. So that's kind of neat. Its GX attack, if you can manage to use it, is for 1 Psychic Energy, and it heals all damage from 2 of your benched Pokemon. So it's not as strong as, say, Primarina's attack, but it also is on a basic, so you wouldn't expect it to be. Yeah, if you can use it, that's pretty good in a few matchups. You usually have better GX attacks to use, is the main thing I would say. However, there are quite a few times that will end up coming in handy in certain decks, so keep it in mind. Also has an alternate artwork from promo stuff as well, which I think Sai prefers. Honestly, they're very similar to me. I know the Tapus are canonically assholes, so I kind of don't think this one fits the characteristics of Lele. That's just me, personally. There is a Lunala in here too, but unfortunately it kind of gets shafted, so once again, regular Lunala, not very strong. There's a Machoke in here that's pretty good. It lets you prevent all damage and damage counter placement on your bench Pokemon, so that's kind of neat. It's like the opponent's attacks can't put damage counters on anything, which is very, very good against a couple of things in particular, like Decidueye. So yeah, not too bad to have around. Sudowoodo is pretty strong. I think a lot of players would have liked this against Rayquaza a little bit earlier than what we have here. Basically, if you put this on the bench, the opponent can't have more than 4 Pokemon on their bench. And there is clarifying text. If there's like multiple things in play that change the amount of bench Pokemon the opponent can have, it is always the smaller count that matters here. So if Skyfield is in play and you put down Sudowoodo, the opponent still can't have more than 4 Pokemon. So yeah, doesn't do anything else, but it doesn't have to. That's a really good effect. Fighting stuff otherwise doesn't get good until we get down the bottom with Lycanroc here. The Rockruff has Corner. It can technically matter. It's going to be less relevant this generation because Guzma comes out next set and is another sort of switch card that we can play, so like there's no shortage of switching outs in this generation, so this effect will be a bit less relevant, but it's still kind of cool. The Lycanroc, on the other hand, is another iteration of Luxray or Umbreon EX, if you want to go that far back. Bloodthirsty Eyes gust up one of the opponent's Pokemon when you evolve into Lycanroc, which is really good. It is mostly good for that ability, because otherwise, like 200 HP on the average side. Claw Slash is an average attack as well. For fighting double colors, it does 110, so it's like not that impressive, but its GX attack is really nice to have as well. For 1 fighting and 1 colorless, Dangerous Rogue does 50 for each of the opponent's benched Pokemon, so it can cap out at 250 damage, which is enough to one-shot everything, obviously. Yeah, very nasty attack to have around, and really makes the opponent play in different ways to what they would like to. So yeah, it's a one-shot type GX attack that is super nice to have. Also, it doesn't cost quite as much as a regular attack, so that might matter sometimes if you can't quite pay for Claw Slash. Otherwise, yeah, not much in the fighting department. Unfortunately, as high as the numbers look on Mudsdale, it just takes too much energy. Typical fighting type problems, you know. Minior knocks itself out to do the 190 damage, which is admittedly a lot of damage, but automatically knocking itself out is not very good, so whatever. As far as the dark types go, there are very few of them, but Honchkrow is worth noting. Later on, this card is pretty solid. Right now, I think there's just not quite enough spread tools for it, even with Tapu Koko being available. Raven's Claw for a double colorless lets you do 10 plus 10 for each damage counter on all of the opponent's Pokemon. Now, there are some ways that we could make this work, but I think it's just a bit too clunky right now. Tapu Koko is very solid and can spread a lot of damage down, but I just don't think it's quite enough, especially if the opponent just doesn't bench enough Pokemon for you to work with for it. And yeah, I'm just not convinced yet. I'm still trying to tinker with it, but I think there are a couple of cards coming out, specifically Weaviles, in future sets that will make this much better. So this is a project for the future for me. Otherwise, there's an Absol that's got really good artwork, but it's really bad, so whatever. On to the metal stuff, which there's very little of, but two Pokemon do stand out here. First off, Beldum's got a 1 energy retreat, which I don't understand, but it makes it very good with Vulpix, so that's very good. Because Metagross is insanely strong too. 250 HP, it's at the top end of your Stage 2 GXs, so very, very hard to KO. It is Heavy Ball searchable if you want to go down that route, which is pretty good. And it's got 3 very good effects otherwise. Probably the worst part about it actually is Giga Hammer, which is funny to say, but for 2 metal and the colorless it does 150, and it can't use Giga Hammer next turn. With a Choice Band it does 180, which is enough to KO most basic GXs, that's where you need it to be, and 150 is enough to KO basically every 1 Prizer, so that's fine. Can't use it next turn, doesn't matter too much because you're probably paying retreat with this anyway, so that's okay, because it has acceleration built in. Once during your turn before you attack, Geotech system lets you accelerate a Psychic or Metal energy from your discard pile to your active Pokemon. Normally these kind of effects only go to the bench, so going to the active specifically might be a little bit restricting at sometimes, like you might not be able to get as many energies you want down, but this is insanely good for powering itself up, which is really strong. And Algorithm GX is also insane. It's an N or Die GX attack here. For 1 colorless, you search your deck for up to 5 cards and put them into your hand. Any 5 cards you want, because Computer Search wasn't good enough, right? This is Super Computer Search, because he's a supercomputer Pokemon, obviously, so it makes sense. Any energy, so you splash a couple of Psychic energy into the deck as well, just so you could potentially Anchor Shot, or use like Tapu Cure if you don't want to use this. But yeah, it just searches your deck for any 5 cards. You're going to be able to get access to your Rare Candy Metagross stuff to get 3 of them down, and from there you just keep swinging. There's not much else to stop you. The other metal Pokemon that's good in here is Solgaleo. This is a 160 HP single prizer, so on the top end of that stuff too. And it's a couple of good attacks on here. Shining Arrow snipes 50 for metal and the colorless. Bit trickier than Ninetales to get going, but that's fine. It's going to be used in a largely metal focused deck anyway. And Fangs of the Sun for 2 metal and 1 colorless does 170. But you can't use that attack next turn. You can still Shining Arrow, but you can't Fangs of the Sun unless you get to the bench. That's still very powerful though, and with a Choice Band that's 200, which is enough to KO a lot of Stage 1 GXs, so very nice. It fits into the Solgaleo stuff fairly well. I had to take it out of my Metagross Solgaleo deck unfortunately, because I just couldn't keep it, like space-wise I couldn't manage to fit it in. But it's not because the card is bad, it's just unfortunate on my end. I'm sure you could use it, it'd be really, really nice though, so yeah, good stuff there. Whimsicott is funny because the Wages of Fluff is a great attack name. If the opponent doesn't switch for some reason and you KO them next turn, then you take 2 more prizes. I guess that's cute, but it's obviously not very good. What is good, however, is the very pouty or very surprised Pikachu face if you want to go down that route. Sylveon GX. Keep in mind, like I said in the last set, Energy Evolution on the EV makes this a much, much better card than it initially looks. And unfortunately, it is nothing but a control tool in its own pure deck, but don't worry, I'm probably going to build the Guardy version of it next set and be able to use it for what I think it was intended for, or at least what I hope it was intended for. 200 HP, 2 retreat is kind of whatever, it's probably not retreating much in its own deck anyway, so that's fine. We do have Fairy Garden in the format as well, so we could give it 0 retreat with that. For 1 Fairy Energy, Magical Ribbon searches your deck for up to 3 cards and puts them into the hand. So, in its pure deck, that's going to be Team Flare Grunt, and Delinquent probably. Or some other stupid stuff like that. Crushing Hammers, of course, can be the thing. But in the Guardy deck, that would be like Rare Candy, Gardevoir, whatever. It's basically a super Vulpix at that point, which is really good, because you get the items you need to. For 1 Fairy and 2 colorless, it does 110 damage with Fairy Wind. That's the strongest freaking Fairy Wind I've ever seen. It's only 40 base power, so I don't know how it's doing that. But, you know, it is what it is. And its GX attack for the same 1 Fairy double colorless cost is Plea, that makes your opponent put 2 of their bench Pokemon and all cards attached to them into their hand. you get to choose what they are, obviously. So if the opponents played a lot of like rare candy stuff, you can bounce those back to the hand. It can also set them massively behind on attachments as well, which is rather nasty. So yeah, pretty dangerous attack to have, even if it doesn't look that great, because you can't disrupt them at the same time with it in terms of shuffle them back into the deck. There are many circumstances that GX attack is insane, so it's a tricky deck. I'm probably not going to play it because I just don't like playing this sort of thing. I'm also just not very good at it, so it's kind of hard to show this stuff off. But I don't think anyone else is going to want to play this one, and I haven't played this kind of deck in absolutely forever, so if anyone's going to do it, it'll probably be me. But I have much better things I want to show off here. We'll see how session 1 goes, and if the second one ends up being like most of the decks I want to play have been shown off, maybe I will play it, who knows. Unfortunately, none of the dragon types in this set are any good, but we do have a GX to speak about, I suppose. Komodo is probably one of the worst GXs in the entire Sun and Moon block, to be honest, one of the worst ever printed. 240 HP stage 2, not even the bulkiest of them. Adamantine Press, 30 damage, take 30 less next turn. 1 colorless energy is like, I guess that's okay, but not on the stage 2, right? Kinda stupid. For 1 lightning, 1 fighting, and 2 colorless, Shred only does 130 damage. It's not affected by effects on the opponent's active, which is neat, but we don't even have Safeguard until next set. So I don't know why we need that right now. So that's kind of bad. And then for that same cost, Ultra Uppercut GX does 240 damage, and that is it. It's like, okay, that's a lot of damage, but it technically doesn't even one-shot everything by itself, which is stupid. And yeah, like, why are you putting that much energy of different types, no less, on this Pokemon? It's not even Grass and Lightning, right? So at least if it was that, you could use it with Vikavolt, I suppose, if you're feeling dumb. It's just useless. Like, there's unfortunately nothing good to say about it. It's just bad. Colorless has got a couple of Pokemon to round this off here as well. There is a Blissey that if you evolve into it lets you heal 80 when you're active. That's kind of cool, I suppose. Not very good otherwise, but hey, it's at least funny. I think because Chansey on Evolutions has got a free energy retreat cost, you could use it as a heavy ball search thing, I guess, if you really want. There is Rayquaza, which almost was really good, but it's just a little bit too awkward to play, I think. 120 HP, only a 1 retreat, which is nice too. Ray tends to have 2 or 3. And Turbo Storm is the attack that we care about. For a double colorless, it does 30 and attaches 2 basic energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. That is insanely powerful, actually, as far as effects go, but it's just a little bit tricky to power the Ray up, I think is the problem. Most of the attacks like this we've seen are like Oblivion Wing, or that kind of effect where it's like do 30 for 1 energy and accelerate 1 to Pokemon on the bench. That's like really good because it takes just 1 energy to do. This one takes the double colorless specifically, which is hard to get out of the deck, and you need to have a bit more setup in the discard because you've got to have 2 basic energy in there, which is not straightforward to do even in this format. Like, getting that specific setup for just 1 if it hits off it, a little bit awkward. Dragon Claw also just doesn't do enough damage, so we're not going to care about that. I've seen like 1 deck that topped with this. I'll have to have a look later on and see if there's more, but it's not as good as it looks, unfortunately. And then finally, one card that very much is as good as it looks is Drampa GX. This actually won the NAIC with Tord as well, playing Drampa Garbodor. So, excellent card to have around to finish this off here. 180 HP, so slightly on the low end for the GXs, or the basic Pokemon, but obviously 180 is still very powerful, so we have that going for it. And all 3 of its attacks are good. For 1 colorless, Righteous Edge does 20, and just like Cobalion EX in the past, lets you discard a special energy from the opponent's active. There's a lot of special energy going around at the moment, so that's very good disruption. Berserk for 3 colorless energy does 80, but if any of your bench Pokemon have a damage counter on them, this does 70 more, so it goes to 150. Again, 180 with Choice Band, so it kind of just gets a lot of one-shots all over the place. And Rainbow Energy can count for putting that damage counter down. That's what makes it easy enough to get going. Finally, Big Wheel GX is the second of the End Me or Die GX attacks here. For 1 colorless energy, it shuffles your hand into your deck and draws 10 cards. Shuffle draw 10 is like never something you would see like ever in the format. I think Shuffle draw 8 happens at one point if you have had a KO against you, but Shuffle draw 10 just doesn't happen. This card is very, very powerful, and again, you will use this GX attack very early in most games, so Hala is actually a considerable tech here. It's not usually played, but it's something you could consider. So, yeah, very, very powerful set here. As you can see, we've been speaking for almost an hour on this one, and yeah, there's a few cards that are, you know, just maybe a little bit meta-defining in here, right? And a lot of them just get better as they go as well. Lycanroc gets way better when Buzzwole and Zoroark and stuff come out, for example, so see a lot more of that later. Sylveon can do some other stuff later too, which is really nice. Tapu Lele just stays good the entire time, that's obviously very nice too. Vulpix gets a lot better when we get the non-GX Ninetales as well, because it's got Safeguard. So many cool cards in this set though, loads and loads of stuff to talk about and play as well. So yeah, we're excited to play at least like 2 sessions of this. I think we've covered basically all the decks that we want to play here. So look forward to those, and we will see you for those games next time. Thank you very much for watching. And always gotta love this part of the song to finish things off. But yeah, take care everyone.